Welcome to the Booktopia podcast. I'm Ben Hunter, Booktopia's fiction category manager. I'm here with my colleague, friend, and crime queen, Sarah McDuling. How are you, Sarah?
I'm good, thanks.
And it's our delight to have back in the podcast studio a friend of Booktopia and one of the world's, I'm going to say, or at least the English-speaking world's greatest living crime writers, one of the most highly sold authors, over 6 million copies in print. It's Michael Robotham. Michael, thank you for joining us.
It's wonderful, as always, to be here.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about the new book?
When You Were Mine is a standalone, which I know is going to disappoint a few people that wanted to see me continue the story of Cyrus Haven and Evie Cormack, who were in my previous two books. I am back working with them at the moment, so there will be a Cyrus and Evie book next year. But this one's a standalone. I like taking a break. It features a very, very strong female cast, which I've sort of become used to doing that now. I did with The Secret She Keeps, was told through points of view of two women. This one, the narrator is Philomena McCarthy, who is a young policewoman in London working with the Metropolitan Police, and she's defied the odds to become a policewoman because she comes from a criminal family. Her father and her uncles are notorious London gangsters who purportedly have gone straight and are now property developers, and if you can see, my fingers are making little sort of inverted commas, and but she knows that she's got to try to escape that past. She's been lucky, really, to become a police officer with a background like hers. She's had nothing to do with her family for about 10 years, but her life is going to be drawn back into their orbit, I suppose, over the course of the book.
I love it. Writing a standalone is exciting, right? It's a chance to write in a new voice, a new narrative world. Does it terrify you jumping into something new, or do you find it's a freeing process to escape the regulars?
I mean, what my background was, having been a journalist for many years, I was a ghostwriter, and I did 15 autobiographies for 15 well-known people, notable people, and if my job was to capture their voice completely so that nobody recognized my fingerprints on it. And it meant that for that 8 months or that year that I was working with, whether it be Lulu or Jerry Halliwell or Rolf Harris for my sins, I would be trying to look at the world through their eyes. And I think writing a standalone allows me to do that, to do something new. As much as I love my regular characters in a regular series, the chance to create someone new, to find a new voice, to look at the world through the eyes of a young policewoman in London. And that to me, anyone, this is sort of radio as such, this is a podcast, but I am an aging, greying, balding, grumpier by the day, middle-aged man. And the idea I get a chance to write in the voice of a young mid-20s policewoman and try to do it so well, hopefully, if I do it well, because we all know women are the great readers of fiction, more so than men oftentimes, and they're also the great readers of crime fiction. And if I get it wrong, I'm sure they're going to be very quick to sort of point out, well, that's just a bloke trying to pretend to be a woman. So to me, it's the ultimate challenge to capture a female voice and to do it well enough that people buy into the fact that Philomena McCarthy is a real person.
I love Philomena McCarthy. Do you love Philomena McCarthy,
Yeah, I was
Sarah?
just going to say, you totally nailed it. Not that we expected anything else, but 100% love Philomena to the point where I know this is a standalone novel, and I just wondered, will we see her again, maybe?
It's really interesting. It's such a wonderfully delicious setup, the idea that, even without giving the ending of the book away, the idea that she has this family and the idea that she still wants to, she becomes a police officer in the opening chapter. She's 11 years old when the Tavistock bomb explodes in London, in the May 7 bombings, which saw bombs exploding on the underground. And she becomes a police officer because there's a young police officer that day that comforts her, and she thinks, I want to do that. And so there is great scope for carrying on Philomena's career, but having this criminal family that she's got to try to navigate, knowing that her father, is involved in all sorts of dubious, projects. There is great scope for more books. I'm just not sure whether I want to tackle a new, having got Evie and Cyrus underway, whether I want to tackle a new one. But look, it says it's called a standalone. It's a standalone until I write another one.
I like that answer because it truly is delicious and a real origin story for a character that I feel, I'd love to read more down the line.
Yeah, well, never say never.
I'm also very looking forward to the new Cyrus and Evie. So I'm not going to interrupt the flow.
It is a gorgeous setup you outlined. You got a young cop who's hopeful and straight in a not in a corrupt kind of establishment. And it's set contemporarily. So Black Lives Matter and the distrust of the police are a thing. And she has this complex past with crooks for parents and uncles. But at the same time, it sounds like the perfect police procedural, but at the same time, you have a psychological element that gets introduced there where obsession and distrust become more and more potent in your narrative without spoiling it.
Yeah.
Where do you think this sits? Do you even
Yeah.
like to
You
play
define
in
it.
subgenre terms?
I don't think it's a police procedural because it's not about a crime that the police have to solve as such. And I've always avoided police procedurals because I think they're so... A, because I don't think I know enough about the way the police work, and B, it's sort of very... I mean, anyone that knows anything about the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, particularly in the UK where my books are set, knows that there are so many strict laws about who you can interview and how you can interview and how long before you have to give them a break, and it's so, to me, constricting, as a writer. Whereas, in this case, I guess the seed of the idea for the book, because, I guess, Philomena is doing a regular shift at the police and she's called to a domestic abuse case, which is, the bane of all police's life, really. It's the cases they hate the most. And I talk to a lot of young police officers and they say the same thing because, they're always difficult. And oftentimes, the victim isn't willing to press charges. Yeah. And so they can't really help them unless the victim is willing to go that step further and press charges. So in this case, Philomena rescues a young woman from a violent situation, Tempe Brown, and it turns out that she's a mistress and the perpetrator is a decorated London detective. And straight away, this is where really the seed of the idea came from, is a year or two ago, I watched a program about domestic abuse and it featured the fact that police officers do not investigate their own. And some of the if you're a victim, if you're the spouse or the intimate partner of a police officer and you are being abused, you will get very little help from the police. They will close ranks around their colleague. And similarly, even if you wanted to go to a shelter, the police know where those shelters are. They're normally private addresses. They also have access to all the computer systems that can track you down no matter where you try to hide. There's nowhere you can run. They will find you. And I thought that was quite a terrifying situation to be in. So that was the scenario I set up with Philomena, and this police officer who can destroy her career. He's much more senior. He's a pin-up boy for the London Metropolitan Police. And he can destroy Philomena's career, and yet she knows that he is an abuser. He hasn't just abused Tempe. There are other women who have been victims. And so her sense of justice and her sense of right is going to collide very much with this man's corrupt practices.
Yeah, we were talking about him earlier.
Yeah, what a character.
We just kind of described him as misogyny incarnate.
Yeah, pure evil.
Yeah.
I'm one to often ask the questions of authors that they say, I can't answer that, it's too spoilery. So you might need to tiptoe around this one, or feel free to just say, no, next question. I want to talk a little bit about Tempe, but this is a character that you hint at the blurb that she's not everything that she might seem at first. But Are you able to tell us a little bit about where the idea for Tempe came from without sort of spoiling too many details?
I know. I think I can tell you a little bit. I mean, Tempe, as I say, she is the victim, and she's always a victim. She doesn't. Nothing changes the fact that she is a victim in this story, and she has been abused by this police officer, and in many ways has been abused by life. But she is damaged in some way, and I guess the other issue, apart from domestic abuse and that issue, a hot button to me anyway, was the idea of toxic friendships. That we often have friends who cling, and who cling so tightly that you cannot escape. It's almost like they resent you if you get a new friend or a new boyfriend or whatever because you are theirs. And so Tempe has this sense of she is completely blown over by Phil, who's rescued her. I mean, the idea that she's seen a woman stand up to a man. I mean, just take a man down, physically take him down. And so Tempe becomes besotted by Philomena and wants to be like her and to be friends with her. But over the course of the book, you see more and more how she begins to infiltrate herself into Phil's life, and what seems like, what could be this amazing sort of friendship, there's something not quite right about Tempe and Tempe's motives and where she's going with this. And so all of that is folded into the plot.
Oh, this book is just so amazing. Hearing you talk about it just makes me want to read it all over again. I wanted to squeeze in a really frivolous pop culture question. Would you allow me that, Michael?
Go for it.
So Phil does karate, and in the book there is a mention of Karate Kid and Cobra Kai, and I just recently fell into a hole where all I watched was Cobra Kai until there was no more Cobra Kai. Are you yourself a fan?
Look, it's funny. I've watched 1 or 2 episodes of it, and it was only when I was doing the research on the karate element of Phil's, because I wanted her to have this sort of, even though she's a small, I mean, she's quite small, but because she's got these martial arts skills. But what I discovered you're not allowed to use, if you're a police officer, it is illegal to use any form of force that hasn't been taught to you at the academy.
Wow.
And so she, and instinctively, because she's learnt karate since she was a child, and it allows you to disable much larger, stronger people that attack you. So I was sort of doing some research into that, and then I discovered that the form of karate with the Cobra Kai, and then I watched a few episodes, and I thought, okay, because I'd watched the Karate Kid. I was there. I remember those movies.
Wax on, wax off.
And so the reference came into it. I haven't completely gone down the rabbit hole like you though, Sarah.
Oh, I was lost. All I could consume was Cobra Kai until there was none left. But I enjoyed the reference.
While we're at it with frivolous, strange questions, I want to ask about wedding planning.
Oh yeah.
there's wedding bells ringing throughout this novel, and the strap line is "Till death do us part." Is that that's right? I think this novel will just appeal to anyone who's tried to plan a wedding in the last 18 months with COVID and the catastrophe of trying to organise a marriage, even in the best of circumstances. But I love Philomena's and her husband-to-be's tenacity in going forward with the wedding. The whole, they've got people stalking them, the parents are in trouble, their relationship is falling apart. Philomena's career is on the line. Murder is afoot, but the wedding just goes forward.
Got to do it. Well, particularly, it's one of those things. Anyone that knows anything about particularly getting married in the UK, if you have a venue and it takes so hard to get the right venue, nothing is going to stop you, because you can't suddenly say, "Oh, look, we've been sick. Can we put that off for a week?" No, it's short of being in an iron lung. You are marrying on that date.
Your readership, I imagine, is now hitting new heights, which I didn't even think is possible. But certainly your sales with us are huge. And with the pandemic, I imagine you haven't been going back to the UK, Europe, or America. Does Do you feel like that's dodging a bullet in a sense, that lets you continue the work and avoid some of the more hard slog of author life, or do you love that? And do you love going and meeting readers? There's nothing wrong with loving it.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, I do. I mean, one of the things, my wife resents me at the moment because, you know, I've been self-isolating for 27 years. So COVID has meant absolutely no change. Aside from I haven't toured a book, you know, this will be the first. Last year I didn't tour a book. This year I will hopefully, you know, it's all planning that I will get out and meet people and tour this book. But realistically, my life hasn't changed. If anything, you know, every time I hear, you know, people say, or politicians say, we're all in this together, I'm going, we're not actually, you know, because if anything, my book sales are up because with people locked down, they bought books with their ears pinned back, as you guys would have completely, Booktopia realised that it's been an astonishing time to be selling books because people have been often locked in their homes and they're desperate for entertainment. So book sales are up, you know. I mean, last year I had, you know, I won my second Gold Dagger, you know, again, during COVID, as much as I would have loved to have been in the UK, like the first time was an amazing sort of big black tie event. You know, this time it was done on Zoom. My wife was a bit resentful of that because she wanted to be in London so we could get, but, you know, that's what life is. But, you know, I had the TV series The Secret She Keeps came out last year, and it was not just a hit in Australia, but it was one of the 5 most watched shows on the BBC and stream shows on the BBC last year. The first Australian show to ever premiere on BBC One in prime time. Normally Australian dramas had been put in BBC Two or BBC Four or whatever. This went to BBC One. And so professionally, you know, 2020, was one of the biggest years of my career. And I feel guilty in a sense about that because, you know, the world's going to hell in a handbasket and you know, I can understand my wife resenting me.
It's not like you didn't work hard for it, though.
No, that's true. And you know, it's you know, I do miss the touring, and particularly because this year not only we'll be filming a second series of The Secret She Keeps in September, but they start filming, you know, World Productions, who made Line of Duty and The Bodyguard and The Bletchley Circle, begin filming a Joe O'Loughlin series in September in the UK.
Wow.
And I would love to tell you who is the star because it is a huge name, but I can't.
You're not allowed?
I'm not allowed.
Oh, that's cruel.
I know. But, you know, when it's announced, it's an astonishing
massive
cast.
News.
Yeah, it's big news.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait to.
So it's been, and I'd love to be there in September, and I can't be, but I mean, that's the least. I mean, there are far more people with far more important reasons to be overseas than me. I do have a daughter in LA who I haven't seen in a couple of years, and I'm desperate to sort of try to see her. Yeah, so it's interesting talking about COVID because I had this book was set contemporary, in contemporary times, and I had a lot of COVID references in there, and a lot of my publishers actually asked me to take them out.
Oh.
They said that it's actually, they feel as though, and I hope they're right, that we are almost, you know, we're getting
Saturated.
And also they think it dates the book too much. I think in a year or two, when we're hopefully through this, God, for everyone's sake, we're through this, that it will date the book too quickly. So there are references in there, a few, but there were a lot of, I mean, I really had set this book in COVID times in the UK, and then they sort of said, do you mind if you take the references out and just have one or two?
Yeah, that's a tricky choice.
Yeah.
I hope they made the right one.
Yeah, well, because it's interesting. The book before that, you know, When She Was Good, actually the opening chapter says May 2020. It's set in May 2000, and there's no reference to COVID because I wrote that book before COVID happened.
Of course.
And so
that definitely dates it.
That definitely dates it, you know. So
Officially dated.
yeah, and so yeah, I mean, I think they're probably, and it's funny, not just the UK publishers, the American publishers felt the same thing.
I think it's the right call because there is a timelessness to your books, so that you feel that you can read the older ones and they're still like they don't feel dated.
And it's interesting, particularly when you're writing in the first person present like I do. It's supposed to be present, so they do date very quickly if you're reading about something that happened a long time ago.
Yeah. I did want to ask a bit about having had The Secret She Keeps come out. Has it changed at all the way that you write? Do you have it in your head that you write in a different way in terms of like a possible screen adaptation? Do you like cast the characters, or is that just something that the readers do? Because I must admit, I was trying to think about who would be a good Phil, and I just couldn't come up with anyone who would do it justice.
No, I don't think about. The only thing I think about is really funny until I because I've been involved in the TV writing room for the Secrets You Keep series, so I know little things now about. But when I say budgets, things that are really expensive to film, like if you set something on rain is really expensive. Whereas it used to be aerial shots were really expensive. Now drones have made them cheap. You have drones flying everywhere, and that's fine. But it used to be if you had to hire a helicopter to shoot something, that's very expensive. And it's why Matt Riley used to always say with his books, that they'd never be made into films because the budgets would have to be so high. You'd be blowing up aircraft carriers and the like. No, little things just stick. Occasionally when I'm writing, I'm thinking about, they'd have trouble with that because if they were filming this before the watershed, you couldn't film that scene or whatever. But it's just a fleeting thought. I don't think about it at all in terms of
The big movements of the plot or anything.
Well, I've waited a long time. When you think I've been writing now I worked out the other day that first book, The Suspect, that sold, on the first Joe Lachlan was published in 2004, but I wrote the 117 pages in 2001, so 20 years ago, and it triggered a bidding war at the beginning of 2002 at the London Book Fair, and that was the beginning of my fiction career. So it's coming up to 20 years.
Amazing.
Life sentence.
There you go. It's longer than a life sentence.
Do you think that you write, riffing off what Sarah asked, do you think your readership is changing in composition?
I don't know. Perhaps, yeah. I mean, it's really hard to tell. I know that characters like Evie Cormack, have attracted even my daughters, and younger people that read that. And it's only anecdotal because you're getting messages on Twitter or on Instagram where, and of course they're the people that have Twitter and Instagram tend to be younger people. So you don't really know, but I get the sense that it's attracted a whole lot of really, young readers that are looking for exciting young characters, in fiction. And I've made Cyrus Haven, is probably his early 30s. I mean, Evie is sort of 18. So, and again, that's you mentioned earlier about the challenge of, writing as a woman, the challenge of writing as a teenager. I'm now 60 years old. It's a huge, I've raised 3 daughters, so I've raised 3 teenagers. And I draw a lot from them. But I'm trying to sort of see if I can challenge myself to capture those different voices.
One thing you said last time we spoke on this podcast that I thought rang really true is that an author is only as good as his last novel, and that's the standard that you hold yourself to. And I wonder, how you are reinventing yourself all the time, and what's capturing your attention now? Who do you like to read at the moment?
What's capturing? I mean, as much as I've adored spending a year with Philomena McCarthy, I'm back with Evie Cormack at the moment, and I think she is the most remarkable character I've ever created. This idea of this very damaged individual who can tell when someone is lying, and every day I look at the world and think, how would Evie see that? What would Evie do here? And that's quite exciting. The best crime, we're talking about books I'm reading at the moment. I'm reading the new J.P. Pomare book, which is not out yet. It's coming out about the same time as my book. So you buy my book first and then you buy JP's book. The Last Guess, which I've read a couple of JP's, his first few, and he's such a talent. I envy his youth because he's got more years of writing ahead of him than I have of me, and his talent. And best crime novel I've read in recent times is the S.A. Crosby book Blacktop Wasteland, which is up for the Daggers are coming up again in the next couple of weeks, and I'm up for not for a Gold Dagger this year. I'm shortlisted for the Silver or the Steel Dagger, But the gold, I mean, I think Blacktop Wasteland's a really good pick to win the Gold Dagger. It's a wonderful crime novel.
You heard it here, everyone. You have tantalizingly mentioned that your next book is going to be a Cyrus and Evie. Are you allowed to give us any kind of vague details about what we might expect from that book?
Yeah, I think for people that have read those earlier books, Cyrus Haven had the tragic backstory that his entire family were killed when he was 13 years old. When I say his entire family, his twin sisters, his mother and his father, and they were killed by Cyrus's brother, Elias, who, when you meet him in the previous book, he's in Rampton, the secure psychiatric hospital, where he's been for 17 years. But in the new book, he is going to be coming out.
What?
Terrific.
He is being released. So Cyrus has got that to worry about. And then Evie, who is now 18 and living with Cyrus in terms of, she's still as mercurial. He's convinced her to go back to school to try to get some form of education, but she just causes mayhem wherever she goes. Mm-hmm. And you have that sort of, there is a crime, a missing woman that is in the midst of it all. And I guess the area I'm investigating more in this book, which is, it's a topical one actually, even having mentioned J.P. Pomare's new book that's coming out, is that idea of the Tinder, that sort of people catfishing people online and Tinder dating, and it's quite a clever idea. Well, I hope it's a clever idea, but Evie thinks Cyrus, because Cyrus is now sort of hasn't got a girlfriend in this book, and Evie thinks Cyrus needs someone, so she invents a fake profile on Tinder to find him someone,
Cyrus?
And she catfishes Cyrus. So that's all.
That's just wild.
I can't wait for this.
So it's all in there.
Creepy and wild as always. Michael, it's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast again.
Oh, it's a pleasure, guys. Thank you.
You can get all of Michael's books at booktopia.com.au.
Thank you for listening to the Booktopia podcast channel. Don't forget, you can subscribe to us on SoundCloud and iTunes for free and get access to hundreds of author discussions, book analysis pieces and more. Or, if your eyes need a workout, head to Booktopia TV on YouTube. Don't forget, for all books featured in this podcast and for access to a whole bunch of other fun content on our blog, head to Booktopia, Australia's local bookstore, at booktopia.com.au.